So this talk will be a little bit different than what I usually talk about. I'm usually talking about data and experiments and so on, and this is much more speculative, thinking about the consequences of doing the research that we're doing, projecting into the future, and we get much, much better at understanding what's going on. What are the consequences of that? I don't usually have the luxury of thinking about such things because we're deep inside designing and conducting experiments, but I thought it would be an interesting exercise. And I'm working on a new book in which I'm going to also explore these kinds of topics. I mentioned yesterday at the benefit lunch that at the end of May I was invited to go to this Australian Leadership Retreat Conference on Hayman Island, which is a tiny little island in the Great Barrier Reef. It's sponsored by the ADC Forum. ADC stands for Australian Davos Connection, which is related to the World Economic Forum, which meets in Davos, Switzerland. This is an opportunity for the world version for world leaders to get together, and these are presidents and captains of industry and so on, to think about strategic issues coming up in the world. And this is the Australian version of it. So this meeting was 130 people who run Australia, the people who are involved in government and business and military and education, who are the leaders. And as examples, heads of the military, their version of the National Science Foundation was there, a number of chancellors of universities, and a number of government ministers. And at one point I was surprised, well, why are we meeting on this tiny little luxury island in the middle of nowhere? And the answer was that because of the nature of the people there, especially the government people, that if we had met in a city somewhere, there would have had to have been security everywhere. Whereas this was almost impossible to find, so they didn't need lots of security around because no one knew we were there. The theme was thinking the unthinkable, and this is going on in every country in the world. The unthinkable thoughts that strategic leaders are thinking about are things like Alzheimer's. In the developed worlds, the average age is increasing pretty fast, and we don't know how to treat Alzheimer's very well, and it's getting worse. And that means we're looking in the future for a huge amount of additional medical expense. Uncontrolled population growth in non-developed countries on an exponential rise. That's also a problem because of resources. Climate change, something like 95% of the world's population lives next to the ocean. That's a problem. Terrorism, it's this notion of asymmetric warfare. A single person now can do great damage to the rest of the world. We were very lucky that Ebola had not mutated into an airborne virus or airborne transmission. If it had, we probably would not be sitting here today. Not because we'd be dead, but because things like air travel would have been very severely blocked. Mass extinction refers to mass extinction of species, which is going on at an accelerated rate, faster than certainly in recent history. Resource depletion everywhere in the world, runaway artificial intelligence among those who think that technology is going to save us from all of this. And the major problem in each one of these is an apocalyptic scenario, but it's the combination of them that are scaring the leaders because their word is threat multiplication. They actually don't know what would happen if two or more of these interact in ways that we don't know how to handle. And so this was the discussion for about a day, and at the end of the day, you just wanted to go to sleep and cry. Because when you saw that the leaders of a large country were basically running scared, they're talking about this is what keeps me up at night, that's not very nice. Well, I knew that this was going to be the topic of conversation, and so the heads of this conference said that they needed a couple of people to talk about more positive things. And could I talk about the future of human potential? And so I gave it in these terms. What if your mind is more than your brain, and what if your mind is not limited by space and time? If that were true, then there's a possibility that we may be able to think our way out of some of these unthinkable thoughts, simply by taking advantage of our own capacities that we're not using fully. So I opened my talk by referring to Sir William Thomson, who gave a talk to the Royal Society in 1900, and he said that the beauty and clearness of physics is at present obscured by two clouds. And he meant that in a very minor way, basically physics is wrapped up. This is 1900. except for two little things on the horizon that will probably clear up soon and then we'll be done. And at the time, physics was considered to be so complete that students were no longer being encouraged to go into physics for that very reason. Well, the two clouds are called the luminous ether and ultraviolet catastrophe. The luminous ether turned into relativity, and the ultraviolet catastrophe, when it was understood, turned into quantum mechanics. Those two clouds transformed the 20th century. It brought us from the industrial age to the atomic age and then the information age. And so you could imagine someone asking Sir William Thomson, what do you suppose will be the outcome of understanding these two little clouds? He would have no idea. He couldn't even guess. Well, I think we're headed towards another even more radical transformation today, because we have two clouds on the horizon. One is called qualia, which is referring to the sense of internal awareness. Where does that come from? Is it the 3 pounds of tissue in your head that are somehow making this feeling of internal self? The other one is quanta. It's nice that they both begin with Q, QU, QUA. Quanta refers to one of the puzzles in quantum mechanics, that quantum systems change their behavior when they're observed. And this makes it extremely different than classical physics. Because in classical physics, it's assumed that things are out there, and if you observe them, they don't change. Quantum physics is very different. So what's curious about both of these are two outstanding problems. They're both having to do with the nature of mind and matter and their interaction. So if we look now at what we think we know about mind-matter interaction, it's a little bit like the surface of the sea or the tip of an iceberg, and we don't know very much yet. There's a little bit that we know that we don't know. So this is just below the surface. These are the questions that are researched now. We're trying to probe deeper into this. And then there's, of course, this.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
So regardless of what you may think about Rumsfeld, that was a good thing that he said, because it is true that in the realm that we're working, there are lots of unknowns that we don't even know what the questions are yet. This is when we go down deeper than we know today. So we need to keep that in mind. And among other things, it should and does for me keep us very humble about what we think we're studying. Because when we don't even know what questions to ask yet, then it becomes interesting. Religions have various ideas about these things. They're considered supernatural in many religions and either considered demonic or saintly, but there's no room for humans here. And this is one of the reasons why in countries that have strong religious movements, it's very difficult to do the kind of research that we do without encountering people who think we're doing the work of the devil or think we're doing the work of saints but shouldn't. Well, I think that what we're going to find is that matter and energy, space and time, we know now our relationships. They collaborate with each other. We'll find that mind and matter are relationships as well. And so here's our future. We have 4 possibilities that I can think of. The first one is maintain the status quo, just stop asking questions. Don't do this, go away. This is still pretty prevalent in the United States. I'm finding in Southeast Asia and Australia and other places where I'm invited to give talks at very high levels, they're very interested in this. They are asking these questions. No one in the United States at the level that I've spoken to in other countries has invited me to talk about this, except in private, not in public. Another possibility is the secret elite. We knew that our government had a secret program of psychic espionage. We know the Russians had one at the same time. We suspect the Chinese do. We suspect everyone does. One of the people at the meeting in Australia was the head of their Defense Intelligence Agency, and after I spoke about the U.S. program, he said, oh yeah, we were tracking them. We know all about that. They don't have their own program as far as I know. If they did, he didn't tell me. But governments are very interested in this, but they're keeping it secret. And so I've reached the end of my time. I thank you for your attention.